The mid-morning sun bounced off glass windows and metal awnings as Sasha King jogged lightly down the steps of a downtown high-rise, her laughter still echoing from the cheerful conversation she'd had with the receptionist on the 12th floor. A small brown package was no longer in her bag, delivered on time, like always. Package dropped, another win for Sasha, she muttered with a smirk, tugging her red courier cap lower over her braided crown. She checked her scanner, ready to head to the next location when a commotion stirred near the corner. People brushed past an older man in a tweed coat who had crumpled onto the pavement like a forgotten rag doll. His cane lay several feet from him. Sasha's heart dropped. She rushed forward, weaving through the crowd, dropping to her knees beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked urgently. The man's eyes were wide, terrified. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but couldn't. "Somebody call 911. Sasha shouted to the crowd, but most people kept walking. One person stopped to film. Another mumbled, "Poor guy," and moved on. She yanked her phone out, dialing quickly. "Yes, I have a man late 60s or early 70s, downtown on Halston and 3rd. He's not breathing right. I think it's a heart attack." Sasha set the phone down and leaned over the man, beginning compressions like she'd learned in a required CPR course at the courier company. Her arms pumped steadily, sweat beading at her temple. "Come on, don't you quit on me, old man. Breathe." A few gasps later, the ambulance siren blared in the distance. Paramedics arrived in a blur. Sasha stepped back as they took over, but one of the EMTs looked at her. "He's got a shot thanks to you." She followed them into the ambulance without thinking. "His name's Harold Franklin," one of the paramedics said. "You a relative?" "No, just someone who couldn't walk away." Harold's eyes fluttered open briefly during the ride, locking on Sasha's. He tried to smile. You saved me," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet," she said, gripping his hand. "You're not off the hook, Grandpa." By the time they reached the hospital, Sasha's fingers were numb from holding his hand. She sat in the waiting area, still in her courier uniform, until a tall, sharply dressed man in a tailored navy suit burst through the doors. He looked important and furious. "Where is he? Harold Franklin? Where's my grandfather?" the man barked at the nurse. "In room 212, the nurse said calmly. "He's stable. A young woman came with him. She's right over there." Sasha stood slowly, brushing lint from her uniform, unsure why his intense energy made her step back. The man turned. His eyes, cool slate gray, landed on her. She recognized the relief as it crossed his otherwise stern face. "You came in with him?" he asked. She nodded, suddenly shy. "He collapsed. I just did what anyone would do." He extended his hand. "Tucker Franklin. Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if..." Sasha waved it off. "You don't have to do all that. I'm just glad he's okay. Tell him. I said take it easy." Before he could say more, she slipped out the door. "Find her," Harold wheezed the next day, his eyes fixed on his grandson from the hospital bed. "That woman saved my life. We owe her." Tucker sighed. She didn't weave a name. She had braids, courier uniform, red cap, called me Grandpa, Harold said with a weak smile. "Go find my angel." Back at his office, Tucker reviewed hospital security footage and tracked down traffic camera images of a woman in a red courier cap helping an older man. Using software normally reserved for private clients, he ran a search. Hours later, a hit, Sasha King, independent contractor, career ID number 9431. He stared at her ID photo, braids, sharp brown eyes, the woman who had disappeared before he could thank her properly. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Let's see what kind of woman runs toward strangers." He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. "Cancel my meetings this afternoon. I have a delivery of my own to make." The next time Sasha saw Tucker Franklin, she was stepping out of a cramped apartment building in Southside, just after a long shift. She was balancing a tote bag of Ruth's art projects and 2 missed calls from her landlord. Her uniform was wrinkled, and her eyes carried the exhaustion of a woman doing everything on her own. Tucker stood by a black sedan, clearly out of place in a neighborhood where no one wore suits that cost more than a month's rent. "Miss King," he called gently. She stiffened, but walked over, her chin high. "How'd you find me?" "I looked," he admitted, hands in his pockets. "My grandfather insisted. He's recovering well, by the way." "I'm glad," she said sincerely, but wariness lingered in her eyes. He offered her an envelope. "He also wanted to make sure you were taken care of. There's a check inside, a token of appreciation." Sasha glanced at it. "No." Tucker blinked. "I'm sorry? I didn't do it for money. I did it because someone needed help." She handed the envelope back, firm and calm. "Tell your grandfather, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't want a reward." He stared at her, a hint of surprise beneath his polished exterior. "You're sure?" "Absolutely." He gave her a small nod and pulled out a business card. "Then at least take this. If you ever need something, anything, call me." She hesitated, then took it. That evening, Harold Franklin raised an eyebrow as Tucker recounted the encounter. "She wouldn't take the money?" he said, half amused, half frustrated. "What kind of woman walks away from a blank check?" "The kind who still walks her daughter to school before dawn and works 12-hour shifts," Tucker murmured. "She's proud." Harold coughed, leaning back against his pillows. "Then help her without letting her know. Not with checks. With kindness, let her keep her pride." Tucker didn't respond immediately. But later that week, a few quiet things began to happen. Sasha came home one Tuesday to find a delivery box at her door. Fresh fruit, meats, whole grains, all from a high-end grocer she could never afford. "What in the world?" she murmured, checking for a label. No sender. She looked around. No one in the hallway. She called the store. "Sorry, ma'am. It was already paid for. Anonymous order." Then her landlord left a voicemail. "Your account's caught up now. Just a reminder, rent's due again on the 1st. "Caught up?" She called the office. "Says here it was paid in full. No note." Sasha hung up slowly, mind spinning. 2 days later, Ruth is dropped off at the daycare center. Sasha goes to the office to ask for an extension. The receptionist said, "Thank you for your payment." Sasha said, "What payment?" Receptionist said, "Looks like the next 2 months are covered." "By who?" "Don't know. Payment was done through the website." It was a gift, a miracle maybe, or a ghost. Sasha stood in her kitchen that night, her eyes locked on the hospital bill she'd left unopened on the counter. Slowly, she ripped it open and found a big red "paid" stamped across the top. Her hand gripped her phone before her brain could catch up. She scrolled to the sleek business card tucked into her drawer and pressed the number. Tucker answered on the second ring. "You paid off my rent, my daycare, my groceries, and the hospital bill too?" Her voice was low, tight. "You think just because I said no to your money, I wouldn't notice when it showed up wearing a different coat?" There was a pause. "I didn't want to insult you," he said gently. "But I also couldn't stand doing nothing." Her anger melted slightly. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. "Thank you, but it wasn't necessary. It's not easy, you know, being strong all the time." "I know," he said. "That's why we wanted to give you a break, even just a little one. You deserved it." As the days passed and the pressure eased, Sasha found herself breathing a little deeper. She enrolled back in her online business courses, something she'd dropped a year ago when money got tight. She still didn't know what to make of Tucker Franklin. But for the first time in a long time, the weight on her chest wasn't so heavy. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to accept a little help, as long as she still owned her future. Autumn settled over the city, in a rustle of amber leaves and crisp wind. Tucker Franklin watched from the tinted windows of his SUV, parked discreetly across the street from the small brick apartment where Sasha and Ruth lived. He hadn't spoken to Sasha in weeks, not since she confronted him about the mystery payments. But that hadn't stopped him from helping. Quietly, every month, rent was paid before the 5th. Utilities? Covered. Daycare? Secured. Groceries arrived like clockwork, always delivered with no name attached. He watched Ruth grow in snippets, a bobbing pink backpack walking beside her mother, her laughter drifting through the breeze as they raced down the sidewalk to beat the school bell. Tucker never got close, never made contact, just watched, protected. "She reminds me of you," Harold had said from his home bed. Watching a short clip, Tucker had recorded on his phone. That little girl has your fire. Tucker smiled faintly. She has her mother's strength. It was a Tuesday when everything nearly unraveled. Sasha had just finished a double shift. She was unlocking the door, Ruth yawning at her side, when the little girl wheezed. Once, twice, then doubled over, struggling to breathe. Ruth? Sasha dropped her keys, scooping her up. Baby, stay with me. Just breathe. You're okay. Mommy's got you. But Ruth's small chest heaved erratically. Sasha bolted down the stairs with her daughter clutched to her chest. She flagged down a cab, breathless and panicked, heart pounding as Ruth's eyes fluttered weakly in the backseat. By the time they reached County General, nurses rushed Ruth in while Sasha trailed behind, shaking. That same night, Harold Franklin's phone buzzed. A nurse from the ER, a friend, called him. It's the little girl Ruth, she said quietly. Her mother is the one that saved you from that heart attack. She came in with a bad asthma attack. She's stable now, but it was close. Harold's heart twisted. I'll tell Tucker. Sasha returned home from the hospital, Ruth asleep in her arms. She paused at their door, confused by the soft bundle resting on the welcome mat. A plush rabbit. Not just any stuffed animal. A rare one Sasha had once tried to win at a charity auction months ago. The same one Ruth had pointed to in a catalog, saying, "That's the one I'd cuddle forever." No one else knew. Sasha stared at it, heat rising in her chest. She unlocked the door, settled Ruth inside, and waited until she was sure her daughter was safe in bed. Then she pulled out the card she'd sworn she wouldn't use again. Tucker was working late in his office when his assistant buzzed him. "There's a Sasha King downstairs. She looks upset." His heart stopped. She didn't wait for an invitation. The elevator opened and Sasha stepped into the room, still in a hoodie and jeans, eyes wild with emotion. "You've been watching us," she said, her voice sharp, shaking. "Rent, groceries, daycare, I let that go. I told myself maybe you just cared. But the rabbit? You bought her the exact stuffed animal she's wanted since spring. You're not just helping, you're following us." Tucker stood, stunned. "I didn't mean to frighten you," he said carefully. "I never came close. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She stepped closer, eyes glossy with unshed tears. "You don't get to play guardian angel, Tucker. You don't get to hover over my life like I'm some charity case." "I didn't think of you as charity," he said, voice cracking. "I thought of you as family." She froze. He rubbed the back of his neck, struggling for words. "My grandfather. He's all I've got. When he almost died, it felt like I couldn't breathe. And then you were there. You saved him. You saved my family, Sasha." He stepped closer, softer now. "I didn't know how to repay that, so I tried to save yours. Quietly, carefully. You're proud, I get it. But I wasn't trying to make you feel small. I was trying to honor what you did." Tears slipped down her cheek now, hot and angry. "I don't need a hero, Tucker. I need to do this on my own." "I know," he said. "But sometimes even the strongest people deserve a break. You gave my grandfather another chance. I just wanted to give you some peace." Silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Sasha wiped her eyes, voice soft. "Next time, just knock. Don't hide behind closed doors." Tucker nodded, a flicker of hope in his chest. "Okay." She turned to leave, but not before adding, "Ruth really loved the rabbit, by the way." The doors closed, and Tucker smiled faintly to himself. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand that behind his silence was something deeper. It was a bright Saturday afternoon when Sasha heard the knock on her apartment door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Ruth was sprawled out on the living room floor with her coloring books, humming to herself. Sasha opened the door to find Harold Franklin standing there, supported by a cane, but looking sharper than she remembered. He wore a tailored gray coat, a warm scarf, and a soft smile. "Franklin," she said, surprised. "Just Harold, please." He tipped his head politely. "I hope I'm not intruding. I needed to thank you properly." Sasha stepped aside quickly. "Of course not. Come in." He moved slowly, with dignity, and she guided him to the armchair near the window. Ruth looked up curiously, then grinned and waved. Ruth, this is Mr. Harold. Remember the man you drew the bunny for in the hospital card? Ruth's eyes lit up. You're the man Mommy helped. You look better. Harold chuckled. That I do. Sweetheart. Thanks to your brave mom. Sasha brought him a cup of tea as Harold settled in. I'm glad you're recovering well, she said sincerely. I owe that to you, Harold replied. But it wasn't just saving my life. It was what you sparked in my grandson. Sasha arched an eyebrow. I know Tucker's been helping. He's only been doing what I asked him to do. After his parents died in a car accident when he was 10, I raised him the best I could, taught him to be honorable, quiet, maybe a bit too reserved for his own good, but good where it counts. I can see that, Sasha said quietly. I was overwhelmed at first, but I'm grateful. Because of the help, however quiet, I was able to re-enroll in my online business classes. No more choosing between school and food. That means more than I can explain. Ruth toddled over with a crayon-streaked paper. Look, this is you, Mr. Harold, she said, pointing to a stick figure with a cane and big smile. You smell like cinnamon and clouds. Harold laughed, his eyes misting. That's the best compliment I've gotten all year. He turned to Sasha, his tone wistful. I hope I live long enough to see Tucker with a few kids of his own, ones I can spoil and share stories with. It gets lonely in that big house sometimes. Sasha looked at him thoughtfully, warmth blooming in her chest. I think he'd make a good father, she said, almost to herself. Harold just smiled, sipping his tea. I think he just needs the right person. The invitation came tucked inside a small envelope, delivered with a bouquet of fall flowers, deep orange mums and golden sunbursts. Inside was a handwritten note in Harold's neat script. Dinner this Friday. No pressure. Just good food and better company. Bring youth. Harold Franklin. Sasha stared at it for a long time, debating. She liked Harold, but the idea of stepping into the Franklin estate, that was different. That was their world. Marble floors, quiet butlers, oil paintings older than her entire apartment building. What would she wear? What would Ruth say? But something in Harold's tone, gentle, unpretentious, nudged her to say yes. Friday evening, the Franklin estate was bathed in soft amber light as Sasha and Ruth arrived. Harold opened the door himself, looking less like a billionaire and more like a kindly grandfather in his sweater vest and slacks. There's my little artist. Harold grinned, bending slightly as Ruth ran to hug his leg. You look lovely, Sasha. Come in. The dining room was elegant but intimate. Fresh rolls, roasted chicken, vegetables that still had color and crunch. No servants hovered nearby, just the three of them around a cozy, candlelit table. Sasha relaxed slowly, laughing when Ruth tried to explain how jelly beans taste different depending on your mood. Harold listened intently, genuinely amused. After dinner, they sat on the terrace as twilight fell. Ruth chased fireflies across the wide lawn. This is more comfortable than I thought it'd be, Sasha admitted. Harold smiled. I figured. I wanted you to know, we weren't always this polished. I grew up in a 2-room house with 3 brothers, didn't have running water most of the time, until I was almost 10. Sasha blinked. Seriously? Oh yes. I made my first dollar sweeping the floor of a hardware store. Harold chuckled. When Tucker's parents died, I made a promise to give him a different life, but I taught him what really matters, how to work hard, how to respect people. Maybe that's why he hasn't settled down yet. Because he doesn't want someone from his world? Sasha asked quietly. Because he's waiting for someone real, Harold said, looking at her meaningfully. At that moment, the back door opened and Tucker stepped into the garden. Granddad? He called, then stopped when he saw Sasha and Ruth. Hey, he said surprised. I didn't know you were here. Harold grinned behind his tea. Thought we could use some bridge building. Tucker walked over slowly. Ruth lit up. Mr. Tucker, you're here. He knelt to high-five her. Of course I am. Someone's got to help you catch those fireflies. Sasha watched them together, Tucker chasing Ruth around the grass, his laughter deep and warm. Her heart betrayed her, beating faster at the sight. He looked right, somehow. Comfortable. Like he belonged in that moment with them. I haven't seen him smile like that in years, Harold murmured beside her. Sasha looked down, unsure what to say. When Ruth finally tuckered out and lay curled up in Harold's lap on a porch chair, he looked at Sasha with a glimmer in his eye. You know, you two really ought to talk about everything, the misunderstandings, the walls between you. She hesitated. I'll watch Ruth, Harold offered gently. Go. The garden's nice this time of night. Sasha found Tucker standing under a trellis of hanging ivy, his hands tucked into his pockets. He turned when he heard her footsteps. You're really here. I almost didn't come. I'm glad you did. She crossed her arms, the cool breeze rustling the leaves. You've been quiet lately. I didn't want to push. After the last time, I figured you needed space. She looked at him, her voice softer now. I did. But I also needed time to realize, not all help is weakness, and not all silence means absence. Their eyes met in the hush of the garden. Tucker stepped forward. Can I ask you something? Sasha nodded. Do you think we could try something real? Not because of obligation, but because I haven't stopped thinking about you. Or Ruth. She smiled, heart thudding. Only if you're ready for a lot of questions about dinosaurs and glitter in your shoes. He grinned. That sounds perfect. Sasha never imagined dating someone like Tucker Franklin would feel so natural. They had settled into an easy rhythm over the past few weeks. Casual dinners at cozy restaurants, spontaneous park visits with Ruth, lazy Saturday mornings over coffee and pancakes. Tucker was patient, thoughtful, and attentive in a way that made Sasha forget the walls she'd once built. They hadn't officially labeled what they were, but the connection between them was unmistakable. That Saturday, they strolled through a downtown art gallery, fingers loosely interlaced. Sasha admired a striking oil painting of a rainy street in Paris, while Tucker listened, genuinely interested in her interpretation. I think it's more about transition than sadness, she explained. The rain, the reflections, it's like it's reminding you to pause. You ever thought about curating? Tucker asked, smiling. You see more than color. Sasha chuckled. Not unless there's a scholarship attached. They were mid-laugh when a voice chirped behind them. Tucker Franklin? Oh my God, it's been ages. Sasha turned to see a tall blonde woman approaching them in stilettos that clicked sharply against the gallery floor. She was dressed in a sleek beige coat over a black silk dress and moved with the confidence of someone who expected every room to pause for her arrival. Vivian, Tucker said, his voice polite but distant. Vivian leaned in for a cheek kiss, but Tucker subtly stepped back, offering a handshake instead. I've been dying to catch up, she purred, brushing her hair over one shoulder. You just fell off the map. Still keeping busy at Franklin Holdings? Tucker nodded. Busy enough. These days, I spend most of my free time with Sasha and her daughter, Ruth. He reached for Sasha's hand, lacing his fingers with hers. Sasha's my girlfriend. Vivian blinked as if she'd just heard something offensive. Her eyes slid to Sasha, scanning her from head to toe, then back up again, with a look of thinly veiled distaste. Oh, she said, voice tight. Well, that's nice. Sasha smiled sweetly and took a step closer to Tucker, her hand resting lightly on his chest. Vivian's painted smile cracked for a moment. I should go find someone I was supposed to meet. You two enjoyed the exhibit. And with that, she pivoted and strutted away. When she was out of earshot, Sasha turned to Tucker, one eyebrow raised. Does that happen all the time? He rolled his eyes with a smirk. Unfortunately, yes. Didn't you see how fake she was? Sasha burst into laughter. She's definitely heading toward her next victim. Tucker laughed with her, shaking his head. You handled that like a pro. Sasha grinned. Please, I've seen Ruth throw better tantrums than that. He pulled her closer, his expression softening. I meant what I said, you know, about you being my girlfriend. She looked up at him, surprised by the sudden shift in tone. Yeah? I should have said it sooner, but seeing you here, standing your ground, being all confident and beautiful, I just wanted the world to know. Sasha felt her heart flutter. She nodded, squeezing his hand. Well, everyone will know soon. The Franklin Holdings annual gala was everything Sasha imagined and more. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light over a room filled with tuxedos, gowns, and champagne flutes. The venue buzzed with laughter, string quartet music, and the occasional clink of glass. Sasha smoothed the satin skirt of her deep emerald dress, one she'd nervously chosen after Harold insisted she attend. Ruth, in a white lace dress with a matching bow, clung to her hand as they entered the ballroom. Harold was waiting near the entrance, beaming the moment he saw them. "There's my girls," he called out, cane in one hand, arms wide in the other. Ruth squealed and ran to him. "Grandpa!" Harold bent slightly to lift her into his arms, ignoring the amused glances around them. Sasha's breath caught for a moment, as it always did when Ruth called him that. She wasn't sure when it started, maybe after their third or fourth visit to the estate, but it stuck. Harold never corrected her. In fact, he wore the title like a badge of honor. As they walked through the grand ballroom, Harold proudly introduced Ruth to everyone in sight. "This is my granddaughter Ruth," he'd say, chest puffed out. "Brightest star in the room. And this beautiful lady right here is her mother, Sasha. Brilliant, strong, and far too modest for her own good." Sasha smiled politely, grateful for his kindness, but still feeling slightly out of place in the sea of old money and high society. But when she watched Harold and Ruth giggling in the corner, she didn't care about the room. They looked so natural, so right together. He tickled her, and she whispered loudly, "My grandpa has the biggest, best heart in the world." Sasha chuckled to herself and took a sip of champagne, letting the warmth of the scene settle in her chest. She often wondered what it would be like, her and Tucker, for real. Not just soft smiles and unspoken promises, but actual permanence, a family. But each time the thought crept in, she'd push it away. That was his world, this was hers. They were moving in the same direction, but maybe not to the same place. She was mid-thought when a familiar voice slithered in beside her at the dinner table. "Well, look who's still around." Sasha turned slightly to find Vivian seated beside her, wine glass in hand, blonde hair tucked perfectly behind one ear. Vivian's smile was sharp, her tone silk-wrapped with poison. "And now your daughter's calling Mr. Franklin Grandpa? You are a very smart woman." Sasha raised an eyebrow. "If you're implying something, don't." Vivian laughed lightly. "Just an observation." Before Sasha could respond, Harold appeared behind them, cane tapping against the floor. "Vivian." His voice was cool but civil. Still engaged to that French investor, what was his name? Vivian stood and greeted him with a forced kiss on the cheek. "Ah, no, that didn't work out." "Pity," Harold said flatly. He seemed like the type who could match your enthusiasm. Vivian's smile faltered, just briefly. Harold turned to Sasha and Ruth, now climbing into the seat beside him. "Ruth, I believe it's time we find you dessert. I saw chocolate mousse over there." Ruth gasped. "Chocolate?" Sasha mouthed a silent thank you to Harold as he took Ruth's hand. Vivian watched them walk away, and Sasha met her gaze. "I didn't need to be smart, Vivian," Sasha said evenly. "Just kind. You should try it sometime." Vivian blinked, then looked away as if Sasha no longer existed, and for the first time that evening, she felt like she belonged. The gala was in full swing by the time Tucker finally broke free from the endless handshakes and forced small talk. He scanned the room until his eyes found her. Sasha, radiant in emerald green, her laughter soft as she chatted with a few attendees near the dessert table. He made a beeline for her, not caring who noticed. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand with a hopeful smile. Sasha raised a brow, amused. "Why?" Tucker leaned in, his voice low but teasing. "Because I want every woman and man in this room to see that we are together, especially Kyle Lane. He's been staring at you like you're a Monet come to life." Sasha chuckled and placed her hand in his. "Oh, so this is a territorial move?" "It's a clarifying move," he smirked, guiding her to the center of the floor. As the string quartet transitioned into a sweeping waltz, Tucker pulled her in close, his hand resting gently on her waist. They moved in perfect rhythm, his touch secure, her steps effortless. Sasha found herself relaxing into the moment, the tension of the evening slowly melting away. "You know," she said quietly, "you're surprisingly light on your feet." Tucker grinned. "I had a good teacher. Granddad made sure I could hold my own at one of these things." "Useful skill," Sasha murmured. Tucker pulled back slightly so he could look her in the eyes. "That's just it. This, the gala, the politics, the networking, it's not my world either. It's just a place I visit for business." He paused, hand tightening around hers. "You and Ruth, your real life, every day." Sasha blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. Just then, the music swelled. Without another word, Tucker leaned down and kissed her, right there, in the middle of the dance floor. It wasn't rushed or showy. It was warm, certain, and filled with quiet emotion. Gasps fluttered around the room. A few whispered, some smiled. But Sasha didn't hear any of it. As he pulled back, Tucker whispered, "Now no one should question what you mean to me." Sasha stared at him, heart thudding. Her walls were still there, but he was gently dismantling them, piece by piece. A week had passed since the gala, and the quiet joy of that night still lingered in Sasha's heart. She and Ruth had been invited back to the Franklin estate for lunch with Harold, something that had quickly become part of their new rhythm. Ruth now treated the estate like a second home, running down the halls with Harold's cane when he wasn't using it, offering her 4-year-old wisdom to anyone who'd listen. While Sasha and Ruth played cards in the sunroom, Harold called Tucker into the library. Tucker raised an eyebrow as he entered. "What's going on?" Harold sat behind his antique desk, the sunlight casting a golden hue across the bookshelves. A small velvet box sat in front of him. "It's time," Harold said simply, sliding the box across the desk. "No more waiting." Tucker eyed the box cautiously. "What is this?" "Something that's been waiting for the right woman, and the right moment," Harold said. "You've made your heart known, son. Now act on it. I'm not getting any younger, and I'd like to see you build something real, with her." Tucker opened the box and stared at the simple but elegant ring inside. Platinum band, vintage design, understated brilliance. He swallowed hard, emotion rising unexpectedly. "Are you sure?" Harold smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything." Later that afternoon, Tucker found Ruth sitting on the floor of the reading nook with Harold's dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web and a crown of paper flowers she'd made from scrap wrapping. He sat down beside her and gently nudged her shoulder. "Hey, Miss Ruth." She looked up at him with a grin. "Hi, Mr. Tucker. I've got a question for you," he said, voice careful. "How would you feel about living here, with me and Grandpa Harold?" Ruth's eyes widened. "Really? Like, all the time?" Tucker nodded. "Like, you and Monty would have your own rooms. We'd have breakfast together, build puzzles, movie nights, the whole thing." She leaped to her feet with unfiltered excitement. "Yes! Can I have a bunk bed? And I want to plant flowers with Grandpa." Tucker laughed, catching her in a hug. "I think we can arrange that." Then, heart thudding, he looked up, just in time to see Sasha watching them from the doorway. He stood slowly, taking a deep breath. "Now I just have one more person to ask." The sun had just begun its descent, casting a warm golden hue across the Franklin estate garden. The same garden where Sasha and Tucker had once shared their first real conversation, now bloomed in full spring, bursting with roses, peonies, and lavender. The scent of the blossoms filled the air as birds chirped softly in the nearby trees. Tucker took Sasha's hand as they strolled down the stone path, her laughter drifting into the air as Ruth raced ahead chasing butterflies. "This place always feels like magic," Sasha said, glancing around. "Good," Tucker replied, his voice suddenly more serious, "because I want this to be the place where something even more magical happens." He stopped beneath the ivy-covered arbor where they had danced that evening weeks ago. Sasha turned toward him, confused, until she saw him lowering to one knee. "Tucker," she whispered, hands fluttering to her mouth. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal the vintage ring Harold had passed on. "Sasha King," he began, his voice full of certainty. "You've changed my life in more ways than I can count. You've taught me what love looks like outside the walls of boardrooms and expectations. I don't want to visit your world. I want to live in it with you. Every day." Tears welled up in Sasha's eyes, her chest tightening with joy. "I love you," he said. "You and Ruth, and I want us to be a family. Will you marry me?" Sasha dropped to her knees beside him, tears falling as she nodded. "Yes, yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. 3 months later, under that very same arbor, Sasha walked down the aisle in a flowing ivory gown, her curls pinned with fresh gardenias. Grandpa Harold stood tall beside her, pride glowing in his eyes as he walked her toward Tucker, who waited with a heart full of love and a nervous grin. Ruth, radiant in her white and lavender dress, sprinkled flower petals with careful, dramatic flair, smiling the entire way. The ceremony was small, intimate, close friends, family, and the garden that had witnessed their journey. When the minister said, "You may kiss the bride," Tucker did so with tears in his eyes and a promise in his heart. And with that kiss, the garden that had brought them together became the place where forever began. The end. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful story by Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow with like, share, and subscribe.